Hello, this is Betty Traciak from kittystamp.blogspot.com, and today I have a tutorial using Stampin' Up's In the Moment stamp set, and I'm using this line image here, and I stamped on cloth to make an embroidered project. Supplies that you need for this project are stamp, ink pad, embroidery floss, scissors, embroidery needles, a piece of light colored fabric, an optional foam stamping pad, and a small embroidery hoop. Begin by inking up your stamp. Make sure that it is well inked, especially in the center, so that you get a very good impression. And then stamp that in the center of the fabric, and I hold that firmly, making sure that I've gotten that particularly in the center, and hold that just for a moment so that that soaks into the fabric slightly. Place the inner portion of the embroidery hoop underneath of the design and center that, and put the outside rim over the top and tighten that down. Take a moment and make sure that this is all quite tight, and it takes pulling a few times to make sure that you have a good tension on the fabric. It's best if you have a nice firm, like a drum, as much as possible. Any embroidery thread will work for this project. I'm using what I have on hand. I have a combination of anchor thread and DMC. I also have put my hoop into a clamp. That's not necessary if on such a small project, if you're just doing this by hand, but for the purposes of the video, I'm doing that to keep this stable. I'm going to use a gray thread to outline the images, and for now I'm going to ignore the small details as far as like the folds. I'll keep that in mind when I'm stitching, but for right now I'm just going to be outlining the main lines starting with her shirt, and I'm using a dark gray for that, and I'm using 3 strands of embroidery floss. This is a 6-strand embroidery floss as it comes off the spool, and I'm going to find 3 strands and separate that. Put a knot in one end. And I'm just going to come up along the edge, and I'm going to do a back stitch to outline. So I come up and then down on the line, move down a space, come up, and go back in the same spot. If you have a different stitch that you like for an outline, that would work too. You can use an outline stitch, a stem stitch, a split stitch, just to get the outline. For this one, I'm going to jump over to her arm, and I'm ignoring, see how there's like 2 little lines here? I'm just going to ignore the small line. I'm going to go for the larger, straighter line and stitch that one. I took this out of the hoop, or I took this out of the clamp because it was easier for me to see and to be a little bit more accurate in my stitching. So here I've finished going around her shirt, And I'm going to continue in the same manner and finish going around her pants and around the pillow. And I'm thinking that when it comes to her feet, I'm going to be probably using just 2 strands, her feet and her hands, because that's going to be a little bit more delicate, but I'm going to use the same back stitch to go all the way around those. I've finished the outline stitches, and for around her clothes I did use 3 strands of embroidery floss, and then I decided to use 2 strands for the pillow and the mug because those are a little bit further back, and then I used just 1 strand to go around her foot and her hand and arm. When I did that, I switched to a finer needle to do those little stitches. For the next part, I'm going to use a fill stitch, and I'm going to follow the lines as a guideline where I can see where it looks like these are the wrinkles in her fabric. So I'm going to fill in stitches going in this direction, following down here until I have this area filled. I start by coming up near the outline. I'm going to come up a little bit away from this spot. I'm going to go back and fill that later, but I'm going to pick this spot here because it's a little bit easier to see, and come up near the outline stitch, and I'm going to go across. Now there was a little extra space in here that I simplified a little bit. I just extended this line when I did my outline stitch. So now I'm going to come across here and take stitches side by side, starting from outline stitch on one side and going to the other side. After I've made a few stitches over here, I'm going to go back and fill in that little area. I just felt like it was easier to start in this more open area and then go back to this area here. So I'm going to continue to fill this in, going across her pants with the blue thread. I finished her jeans, and now I'm going to continue to fill in her shirt, the pillow, and the mug using the same technique. I finished filling in her shirt, the pillows, and the cup, and I also used 2 strands and stitched over top of the lines for the window panes. Now I'm going to work on her hair, and for that I'm going to imagine that the crown of her head here is an oval, and I'm going to fill that with stitches that are side by side. I'm using 3 strands of embroidery floss for this. Helps if I have a knot in the end. It does not matter if you're not perfect on the filling this in, because this part will be covered with other embroidery floss when we're done. This is just creating the base. Now I'm going to go around the outside of the oval that I just created. I'm going to come up with the thread, pull it off to the side, and I'm going to leave a length about, I guess that's a little bit over an inch. I'm going to go back down right near where I came up. I'm going to leave a loop, and then I'm going to come back up right near that same spot. I'm going to take a tiny stitch to secure that in place. If this is a little bit longer, that's okay because this will be trimmed. So I'm going to leave that just a little bit longer, hold that out of the way, and make a tiny stitch. I'm going to do this all the way around her crown. I find this easier to do if I'm holding it rather than on camera. So I'm a little bit slower doing this right now. And I'm going to continue this all the way around the outside. I finished embroidering all the way around the crown, and at this point this looks like a really messy flower. What you do next is you find each loop, pick that up and snip through each loop. Then you can fold the hair down to get an idea of what it's going to look like. And I use some sort of little brush to separate the individual strands so that they will lay nicely. And you can also just use the blunt end of a needle to separate the strands. But this is the brush from the Take a Pick tool, and I just use that to brush that down. Next, take a look at the stamp, and you can see where she has her hair pulled back into a little barrette at about where we made that oval. So I'm going to pick up some of the strands of thread to pull back into a little bun. And this takes a little bit of wiggling it around, figuring out exactly where you want it to be. And that looks like I have a little bit too much, so I'm going to take a few less strands than that. This is pretty fine and a small area to work in, so you could just leave the hair long and not try to tie it back. It's a little bit fiddly to do this. You could trim the hair to any length that you would like. I'm going to try to make the little tie back for her hair, and what I did is I pulled up one layer of the floss all the way around, and I'm going to grab that. And smooth that out. This may be a bit tricky to do on the video here, but I will try. There, I'm pretty happy with that. And then it is just a matter of trimming the hair to the length that you would like it to be. Again, in the stamp, it is just above her shoulders. It may be a little bit difficult to do it quite that short. So I'm going to cut it a little bit longer to see how it looks. I can always cut it shorter. I think I'm going to go a little bit shorter. That actually is pretty cute right there, but I think I'd like to be able to see the top of the arm there, so I'm going to go a little bit shorter. I found that when I was doing the final trimming for her hair, it was helpful to put my thumb on top and spread her hair out. That way I was able to see where I needed to do any little touch-up details. I hope that you have enjoyed this tutorial. Have a super day.